The laughter was too loud for a Tuesday morning. It cracked through the calm hum of Harbor Grounds Café, where the scent of cinnamon rolls curled like a lullaby. Most came here for the quiet, for the window light, for the elderly man in the corner, who never said much, just drank his coffee black, one hand always near the small, faded pin on his chest. But that morning, quiet got drowned out. Colonel Brett Langford, Rhett Mox, had just walked in, voice already raised like he was still barking. Orders in boot camp. His shirt was tight across the chest, sleeves rolled to showcase his gym membership more than any war record. He spoke to no one and everyone, tossing words like grenades into the air. 10 years, active, oversaw 3 battalions, led exercises, across Europe. People saluted when I entered the room. He wasn't talking to a specific person, just the general public. But then he spotted the man in flannel, quiet, seated alone by the window. "You there?" Langford called out already, smiling. "You a vet too?" The man looked up. Tom Rayner in his 70s, white beard trimmed, boots dusty from use. He nodded once, said nothing. Langford strode over. "What's that pin you're wearing?" Tom glanced down. The brass pin had no shine left, just a circle the color of dried blood and time. He didn't answer. Langford chuckled, loud again. "Must be one of those maintenance ribbons," he joked. "Logistics, maybe? I get it. Not everyone saw the fight." Someone at the counter snorted. The barista froze halfway, pouring a latte. Tom's eyes didn't flinch. His hand shifted over the pin, subtle like muscle memory. Still no words. Langford leaned closer. "Don't take it the wrong way, Chief. I respect all service. But some of us had to make decisions, you know?" Tom didn't blink. Didn't even sip his coffee. Langford turned to the room. Not all of us had the luxury of hiding in supply tents. A few scattered chuckles. One man coughed and turned away. The air soured. Tom just nodded. That nod did more than speak. It ended the conversation. Langford raised an eyebrow, half offended, half confused. "All right then." He walked off, back straight like parade day. Behind him, whispers, "Who is that guy?" "Langford? No, the other one. No idea. Comes every Tuesday, doesn't say much." Another voice, soft and clear. "Doesn't need to." Tom sat motionless, watching sunlight dance across the street. His coffee grew cold. The pin on his chest caught no light, but somehow it burned. Every Tuesday, without fail. 3 a.m., like clockwork, Tom Rayner pushed open the glass door of Harbor Grounds Café. The bell above gave a single, tired chime. Always the same table, back right, facing the window, eyes toward the old courthouse. Steps. He never looked at the menu. Coffee, black, no cream, no sugar, no fuss. The staff knew his routine. He placed 2 quarters and a nickel in the tip jar. Exact every time. Then sat, watched, waited. He'd nod at the young barista if she greeted him. If someone tried to strike up conversation, he'd smile politely, then look away. Some thought he didn't like people. Others thought maybe he'd forgotten how to talk. Truth was, Tom Rayner had said everything he ever needed to a long time ago. But Colonel Brett Langford, he was the town's talking head. Member of the Rotary Club, guest, speaker at the high school, host of Veterans Trivia Night at the tavern. His stories were polished, repackaged, and retold like old war movies. He hadn't fired a weapon in combat, but he knew the lingo, wore the boots, and rode the wave of perception. "Not every hero carries a gun," he'd say, smiling into cameras. "Some carry a clipboard. Leadership is a battlefield too," and the town clapped. When the cafe posted photos of veterans for Veterans Month, Langford submitted 5, each with a different jacket, each with a different smirk. Tom didn't submit any. He didn't know the cafe was even asking. Still there were moments that poked through, tiny flickers. Once during a thunderstorm, a kid dropped his plate and burst into tears. Tom rose without a word, picked up the shards, and quietly handed the boy his untouched cinnamon roll. Sat back down like nothing happened. Another time, A drunk tourist started berating the teenage barista about her accent. Tom stood up, slow, steady, and just stood behind her. He didn't say a thing, but the man shut up and left. Nobody saw him come, but they felt him there, and the whispers began. I think he used to be somebody. Maybe Special Forces? CIA? One afternoon, Mrs. Ellery, a retired school teacher, got her porch steps fixed overnight. No note, just fresh lumber and clean hammer marks. She swore she heard footsteps in the early morning. One heavy, one dragging slightly like a limp. Others noticed groceries on their porch, gas tanks mysteriously full. A flat tire inflated without a call. He never signed his work. But in his shed behind a row of tomato plants and under a tarp was a small metal box. Inside, a folded American flag. A creased black and white photo of 4 young men in jungle fatigues, arms slung over each other like brothers. 3 had names written on the back. The 4th, blank. Beneath that, a citation. Yellowed, edges worn. From the president, sealed in. Laminate, never framed. Congressional Medal of Honor, awarded to Sergeant Thomas J. Rayner for acts of extraordinary gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. It was dated nearly 50 years ago. He never wore the medal, kept it in the box. What he wore every Tuesday was the pin, a quiet echo of something too sacred to flash. It was old, faded, barely legible, but it pulsed like a heartbeat. The town never knew, because Tom Rayner had buried more than friends. He'd buried himself, until one morning, 2 high school seniors came in with Veterans Essay Contest flyers in their backpacks. They ordered fraps and stared at him. The bolder one finally asked, "Hey sir, what's that pin for?" Tom looked up, the window light catching the ridge of his cheek. He answered, slow and sanded by time, "It's for keeping promises." The boys exchanged a look. One laughed, not mockingly, just confused. "That's it?" the other asked. Tom didn't blink. "That's everything," and he went back to his coffee, steam rising like memory. The town square was dressed like a parade from an old movie reel. Flags fluttered from every lamppost. Veterans in caps with unit patches gathered around folding chairs, and the school band rehearsed on the green, their instruments flashing in the sun. Veterans Day wasn't just a holiday in Eagle Crest. It was ceremony. It was ritual. It was small-town pride. This year's celebration was going to be the biggest yet, thanks to Colonel Langford and his relentless planning committee. He'd organized every speaker slot, wrote the mayor's talking points, even coached the color guard on their timing. Everything was polished, rehearsed, precise. Tom Rayner hadn't planned to attend, but something pulled him in. A postcard in the mail with the names of fallen soldiers printed on the back. Or maybe the way the morning sunlight broke differently on Veterans Park that week. He didn't know. He arrived late, no ceremony, no wave. Just walked quietly through the crowd, wearing the same flannel shirt, the same worn boots, the same dull pin on his chest. No one noticed him come in. He stood at the back behind the tall hedge near the restrooms. From there, he could see the stage. Langford stood at the microphone, soaking in the applause. His blazer shimmered slightly in the fall sun, covered in commemorative pins and patches that didn't quite match. He was reading his speech with flair, feeding the crowd patriotic poetry and strategically placed anecdotes. "You know, I served across 3 continents, trained NATO troops. I might not have seen combat, but leadership under pressure is a battle of its own," he declared, the crowd responding with polite applause. The mayor nodded behind him. The school principal wiped away a tear. Then the surprise guest was introduced. Major General Carter Weston, flown in from D.C. to add gravitas to the event. The general walked onto the stage with a quiet authority that made the audience lean forward. He didn't smile, just took in the crowd with veteran eyes. "I was asked to say a few words," he began, "but I'd rather share one name. A name I didn't expect to find in your town. A name etched into the Wall of Honor in D.C., though. Few would recognize it on sight." He paused, looked around. Then he saw him. There was a brief flicker in the general's expression. Recognition, disbelief, then certainty. He stepped down from the stage, parting the crowd like a shepherd. Through tall grass, the audience turned, whispering. Who was he going to? Then the general stopped, right in front of Tom Raynor. "Sergeant Thomas Raynor?" he asked softly but with command. Tom didn't move. The general nodded once. "Sir, will you come with me?" Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through wheat. The general took Tom gently by the arm and guided him to the stage. Langford stepped aside, confused, his jaw tightening. Murmurs built like an approaching storm. Then the general turned to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, eyes never leaving Tom's. "This man standing beside me is one of only 63 living recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor." Silence. "You didn't know," the general said, scanning the faces frozen before him. "Because he didn't tell you. Because he didn't need to." Phones rose. Eyes widened. Langford paled. The general continued. "His citation is a testimony of impossible courage. While under heavy enemy fire, he led a team of wounded soldiers 3 miles through jungle terrain, defending their position without backup for 16 hours. He declined a medical evacuation until every man was secured. 3 survived because of him." Someone in the crowd began to cry. Another whispered, "That's him, the guy with the pin." The general looked at Tom. "You've lived in silence, Sergeant, but today, the silence breaks for you." Tom said nothing, just blinked slowly. The pin on his chest, that quiet, fading brass, caught a flicker of gold in the afternoon light. It gleamed, and the crowd, once still, stood to their feet as, on a slow, rising wave of reverent applause shook the square, not for a story told, but for a truth revealed. Tom stood still on the stage, not like a man basking in glory, more like a tree caught in a sudden floodlight. His flannel shirt was wrinkled, his boots stained with earth, and yet somehow, beside the uniformed general and the polished podium, he looked immovable. The applause died down, leaving behind a breathless kind of quiet, a hum. Everyone waited, hoped he might speak. He didn't. Not at first. Langford lingered to the side, face tight, lips pressed into a forced smile. Cameras were on him too, but the light no longer loved him. It clung to Tom now, and he had nothing to offer it. The mayor approached with a trembling hand and whispered, "Would you like to say something, Sergeant?" Tom looked at the microphone like it was a memory he didn't want to touch, but then he stepped forward. 1 breath. 2. When he spoke, his voice was gravel and riverstone, low, cracked, slow. "I was 19. There were 4 of us," said. 3 didn't come home. He didn't look at the crowd, just the empty space above their heads, as if watching something no one else could see. "We made a promise in the mud, in the dark. I'll get you home." That's what I said. The square was so quiet, even the flag seemed to still in the air. "I wear this pin." Tom tapped it gently. "For them. For the nights I can't sleep. For the names I whisper before I eat." He glanced at the general, then at the crowd. "I'm not brave, I'm not special. I just kept walking." His voice cracked on that last word, but he didn't wipe his eyes, didn't look away. "I never talked about it," he continued, because talking felt like taking, like dragging their stories out for applause. He looked toward Langford then, direct, no malice, just weight, some led by command, others by consequence, but we all carry something. Langford shifted, caught mid-breath. His medals shimmered like props under the midday sun. Tom turned back to the people. "You honor us today, thank you. But if you really want to honor someone, find the ones who come back quiet, the ones who sit at the edge of the room. Ask them if they're hungry or just sit with them." And then, no sign-off, no flourish, he stepped back. The microphone hissed in his absence. No one clapped at first. Then, slowly, a boy in the front row stood, put his hand over his heart. Another followed. Then, another. And then the wave came. Not like the cheer for a parade or a football game. This applause rose like a hymn, like a collective breath finally being exhaled after holding it for far too long. Langford swallowed hard. He tried to join the applause, tried to find the rhythm, but it wasn't for him anymore. As Tom stepped off the stage, a young veteran reached out. "Sir," he said, "may I walk with you?" Tom nodded. The two of them moved through the crowd. One man old, one man young, the space parting around them like reverence made visible. The moment didn't end with music or confetti, just silence again. But this time the silence wasn't absence, it was respect. It was thunder resting. By morning, the clip had gone viral. It wasn't even posted by the city. Just someone in the crowd, a teenager who'd been live streaming to her 10 followers. Her phone had caught the whole thing. The general approaching the man in flannel, the gasp, the silence, the 7-minute speech that cracked open a town's heart. Within hours, the video had racked up over 3.2 million views. The comment section lit up like a battleground. Vet Mom 77. "This made me cry. My dad was like Tom, quiet, carried everything alone." Green Beret Ghost. "Langford was never in real combat. You can tell. Respect to Sergeant Rayner." History, Kid 2010. "Why doesn't this man have a book or a documentary yet?" Coffee by You. "That's Harbor Grounds. I've seen him. He tips in pennies." Just Carrie. "I laughed at him once. I feel sick now." The cafe owner posted the full HD version from security footage. "We didn't know who he was. Now we will never forget." By lunchtime, Harbor Grounds Cafe was packed with people. Not for coffee. For penance. They sat at the tables he'd once sat at, whispering stories like sacred texts. That was his seat. He always ordered black coffee, nothing else. "He gave my nephew his gloves last winter. I never thanked him." Langford saw the video too. Alone in his home office, he replayed the moment, frame by frame, where the general passed him, walked past all his medals and polished boots, and chose that man, the one he'd mocked, the one he'd laughed, off as a supply tent nobody. Langford's decorations were still on his desk, but now they looked like props. His Rotary Club inbox was flooded with passive-aggressive messages. "Brett, maybe we need to reevaluate your role in public speaking. Langford, I think you should consider issuing an apology. Quietly, for your own sake." His hands trembled as he held the phone. Then he opened the comments again, searched his name, and he found it. True. Valor 888. Langford's the one who insulted him, right? Typical. Loud ones always hide behind noise. The next Tuesday, Tom walked into Harbor Grounds. The bell above the door chimed, but this time the cafe fell silent. And then, one by one, people stood. Not in performance, not in guilt, in gratitude. Tom nodded once, said nothing, took his seat. The barista, the same girl who used to giggle behind the counter, brought him coffee in a mug, not a paper cup. Set it down gently, with 2 hands, like she was placing something sacred on an altar. "No charge today, Mr. Rayner," she whispered. Tom blinked, then touched the rim of the cup with his fingertips. Langford entered 5 minutes later. He paused when he saw the standing crowd, then saw Tom. It felt like crossing a courtroom. Every eye judged him. Every breath waited to see what he'd do. He walked over slowly, medals gone from his jacket. "Sergeant," he said, voice low. Tom looked up, not cold, not cruel, just steady. "I didn't know," Langford murmured. "I didn't ask." Tom nodded once. Langford exhaled like he'd been underwater for days. "I've spent my life telling stories that weren't really mine," he admitted. "Yours speaks without needing to shout." There was silence between them. Not awkward, not tense, just silence. Like the air had finally stopped resisting. Langford reached into his pocket, pulled out a pin, one of his old commemorative ones. He set it down on the table. "I don't know what mine means anymore," he said. Tom looked at it, then pushed his own mug slightly forward. Langford stared at the faded pin. That humble, sun-worn circle of brass. "May I ask," he began carefully, "why you still wear it? After all these years?" Tom looked up, eyes clear. "Because they can't," he said simply. Langford swallowed hard. Tom didn't offer forgiveness, not in words, but he picked up the pin Langford had placed down and turned it over in his palm, then placed it back next to his own, side by side. Langford nodded, and in that nod was his apology. That night, a new sign appeared outside the cafe window. "Table 7, reserved. Every Tuesday forever. No fanfare, no explanation, just a table. With 2 chairs, one for a quiet man, and one for the weight we all carry." The first letter arrived 3 days after the video hit 10 million views. It came in a plain white envelope, handwritten, with no return address. Tucked inside was a single page, slightly crumpled, folded twice. "Dear Mr. Rayner, I saw you on the internet. My brother never talks about what happened over there, but after watching your video, he sat down at dinner and cried. Then he talked. You opened something in him. Thank you. I think you saved him. Ellie, 16. Tom read it once. Then again. He placed it in the wooden box beneath his bed, right next to the old photograph. 4 young men, still frozen in time. 3 of them smiling. One of them, Tom, looking directly at the camera, jaw tight, eyes too old for 19. The next letter came from a woman in Minnesota, then a boy from Tennessee, then a man from Colorado who hadn't left his apartment in 6 years. Each one began the same way. You reminded me. Some were typed, some scribbled on notebook paper. Some smelled faintly of perfume or diesel or cardboard. One was written in crayon. Tom didn't reply, but he read every word. He bought a small wooden file box and labeled it Ghosts. He didn't tell anyone about it, except once when a young girl from the neighborhood caught him walking through the park and said, "You're that man from the video, right?" Tom hesitated, then nodded. She reached into her backpack and handed him a folded piece of paper, held together with a sticker shaped like a gold star. "I drew your friends," she said. "The ones you talked about." He unfolded it. Crayon lines, stick figures, all wearing little green helmets. Above them, a bright sun. At the bottom, "Thanks for keeping your promise." Tom knelt, put a hand on her shoulder. "You drew them. Just right," he whispered. That night he took out the medal, for the first time in over a decade, not to wear it, just to see it again. To remember that it was real, that it had all happened, that they had all once laughed and sang and bled and died in a place no longer on any map. He refolded the flag, tighter than before, smoother, and placed it back in the box beside the letters. Each page was a ghost, but not the kind that haunted. They were the kind that sang, and Tom quietly began to listen. It started quietly, like most of Tom's decisions. One Thursday evening, long after the last rush of coffee cups and laptops had cleared, Tom stepped into Veterans Memorial Park. The sky had just turned indigo, street lamps humming to life. He walked the circular path alone, boots crunching soft against gravel. He didn't make a speech, didn't carry a sign. He just walked. The next week, he walked again. By the 3rd Thursday, 2 teenagers showed up, not to film him, just to follow at a distance. A week later, it was 7 people. A young mother pushing a stroller, an old man in a Korean war cap, a mailman still in uniform. They walked in silence. Tom never told them what the walk meant. He didn't have to. By week 6, there were 30 people circling the park with him. Some nodded, some cried, some just walked with their heads down, needing no explanation. One night, Brett Langford appeared. He didn't wear his jacket. No pins, no polished boots, just sneakers and a windbreaker. He didn't speak to Tom. Not at first. He just walked. A full hour, 3 laps, right behind him. When the walk ended, Langford stood beside him in the parking lot. They didn't look at each other. Then Langford said, "I used to think respect was something you demanded." Tom answered without turning, "It's something you give." Langford nodded slowly. I've got a lot to give." The next Thursday, Langford brought a friend, then 2 more, and someone brought lanterns and someone else brought coffee, and soon the park was no longer quiet, not in volume, but in presence. It became a weekly chorus of silent steps, a rhythm of healing. Tom didn't speak often, but when he did, it mattered. One night, a young Marine who had just returned from deployment joined the walk. He kept rubbing his wrist like trying to forget the feeling of something heavy. Tom noticed. At the end of the lap, he handed the Marine a small pin. Not the Medal of Honor pin, not even one from his own collection, just a simple metal circle, engraved with 3 words, "Keep your promise." The Marine stared at it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Tom clapped a hand on his shoulder, said only, "You're not alone," and walked on. The circle behind him followed, step by step, one generation learning how to carry the silence of another. Winter came softly to Eagle Crest. The trees in Veterans Park stood bare, skeletal fingers reaching for gray skies. The café turned up its thermostat, scarves replaced ball caps. The Thursday walks continued, even as breath turned to vapor and frost clung to the railings. Tom still came, same table, same black coffee, same pin, but something in him had shifted, not loud, not visible, just lighter. One morning, as the first snow of the season began to fall in thin, tentative flakes, a young barista, the same one who used to giggle behind the counter, walked over with his coffee in a ceramic mug. She held it with both hands. "My brother ships out tomorrow," she said quietly. "I showed him your video. He didn't say much, but he watched it twice, said he hopes he meets someone like you." Tom looked at her, really looked. He didn't smile. He just reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. On it, written in firm, slow letters, "Bring him home." She read it once, pressed it to her chest, and walked away crying. Tom finished his coffee, left the tip in pennies. As he walked out, the wind lifted slightly and snow began to fall in earnest. People in the café watched him through the window. The flannel, the boots, the worn pin glowing like an ember. He paused at the door, looked back, just once and nodded. Not at anyone. Just at the space, the kind of nod that closes a chapter without needing a final word. The bell above the door chimed softly as he left, and life in Eagle Crest resumed, but never quite the same. Because now, in the hush between morning orders and evening rushes, people looked at table 7 and fell quiet. Because now the silence had a name, and it echoed. Still. Strong. Forever. If this story moved you, don't miss what's next. Subscribe now for more powerful tales of quiet strength, redemption, and the human spirit, told like no one else will.